Good evening. The time is 6:30 p.m. and I will now call this special joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education to order. The first item on the agenda is a presentation from Great Blue Research on our school facility survey results. We have Seamus McNamee with Great Blue Research. Seamus has been our point of contact since the very beginning almost on this project.
Yeah.
So I'm going at this point to turn the presentation over to Seamus and
Awesome.
he will present the results.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. So yeah, my name is Seamus McNamee. I am, as of January 1st, the Vice President of Research at Great Blue. I've been working on this project since probably September, right? We kicked this off with the Facility Committee and Board of Selectmen, Board of Education. So really excited to kind of have it come to fruition and present the results. Pete, if you want to hit next slide, we can dive right into it. Oh. Awesome. So we're basically going to cover three things in here today. We're going to do a quick project overview. We're going to explain a little bit about how we got to the results that we're ultimately going to share with you, a little bit on our methodology, the total number of completes we got, and a little bit of what the actual demographics of the folks who took the survey were. For purposes of today, I will probably skip the executive summary. They're both just two kind of text-heavy slides that summarize all the findings. And we're really going to spend a bulk of the time actually sharing the results with you of the study, which we're all very excited about. And I think as you see, as we get into these first couple topics, really the interest and the participation rate was extremely high in the town. So we were super excited to see the buy-in from the town and the amount of folks who elected to take the survey and provide really thoughtful and meaningful feedback throughout. So with that, you want to hit next slide? Cool. So there's a lot of text on this. So I'll just really summarize the key kind of points for you all. We obviously wanted to do comprehensive research. The main goal of the study was essentially to kind of understand what folks' kind of preferred path, goals, and ultimately proposed plans were for the Portland public school system. And with that, ultimately, we want to ask about levels of support, opposition, or ultimately choice of one of three different proposed plans to improve. We specifically focused on the elementary schools, but we also had some questions about how the impact of the capital investments needed for the secondary schools impacted as well. We didn't want to just kind of dive right into that. For these type of studies, we like to kind of, do it in a way that asks a good broad set of questions to the town, where we kind of understand a little bit about folks' baseline before we get into the really specific questions, and we present them with each of the proposed plans in detail and ask them to make some choices. So with that in mind, as you can see in those bullet points, we had a pretty lengthy areas of investigation, or for lack of better terms, topics in the survey. We wanted to touch a little bit on the quality of life in town, the importance of community and priorities and initiatives, the awareness of and perceptions towards the actual schools, obviously, awareness of the options available to them, what their goals were, benefits and drawbacks of the development. And then we wanted to get in a little bit of, okay, hey, we know we're not the end of it. There's going to be some follow-up needed after this. So we want to ask a little bit about how folks want to learn more about these topics we discussed in the survey. And last but not least, how we conducted the research is what we call a dual mode research methodology. So essentially, folks had two avenues to take the survey. The first was what we call a mail to digital recruit. So every registered voter in town got a unique postcard with a QR code and a survey link in which they were able to access the survey from there. And then we also did, the research term is river sampling, but essentially we also provided a link on digital assets through the town website, I believe social media pages as well, where folks could go in and take the survey as well. One of the decisions we made early on in the process was to kind of ask everyone in town, not necessarily just the registered voters. So that was an avenue to collect additional inbound surveys as well. Next slide. So as I said, the participation and interest in the survey was really high. We had 1,000 residents take the survey, which was great. Typically, when we see the town this size, whether we're asking about their municipal utility or just kind of town areas, perception, town services, those type of things, we're really hoping to get in that 400 to 500 range. That's kind of the benchmark in our industry for kind of what we have as actionable results. So we got more than double that in this survey. What that allows us to do really, not only is allowed us to present results with a high level of confidence, any single number you see will have a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. So basically, if you're looking at a 75%, if we were to conduct this survey 100 more times, about 95 of those 100 times, you're only going to see a fluctuation of about up 3 points or down 3 points. So not a huge, sway in the data based on that large of a sample size. And what also that really gives us the ability to do is start to do some subgroup analysis. So one of the nice things about having a sample size this size is we netted out with almost 400 parents who indicated that their child is either currently attending or planning to attend a Portland public school. So we're able to look at some results just for the parents to see kind of where there might be any differences, where support might be stronger, or maybe even a little bit softer than the general public or likely voters as well. Next slide. Great. So this is just a quick demographic profile of the folks we got in town. So as you can see, a pretty good mix of ages. Again, because of the sampling methodology, we weren't looking for it to be exactly census rep to your population. What we were looking for is to make sure we have good sizable buckets in each one of these groups. So with that in mind, you have a pretty good bucket of folks, about 14-15%. Under 34, only 20% 65 or older, and then somewhere between 18 and 20% in kind of those middle adult ages. 41% male to 59%, or 50.9% female, 25% Republican, 34.3% Democrat, with some folks, electing to just say they're unaffiliated, other, or they're unsure at the time. As you can see down here, just to call attention again, we had 42.5% of the sample were parents in general, and 39% of those folks said that they had a child who was either going to attend a school or currently active in one of the public schools. And two final metrics on this I'll just share is we did ask folks if they actually owned real property. So essentially any potential bonding questions or mill increases would affect them. And almost the entire sample did indicate having real property. And last but not least, we did ask a couple likely voter questions. So are you registered to vote? And are you likely to actually vote in the 2024 election? And we had almost, I think, 98.7% of folks indicate that they were likely to vote in the upcoming election, which again, high completion rate, good cross-section of the overall population, and a lot of folks saying they're actually engaged with this topic and interested in voting whenever it does actually come up to a bonding question, are all strong signs that not only do we have a good quality data, but we really have some strong analysis we can do for the town as a whole. Next slide. All right. I'm actually going to skip these two slides if you don't mind. For the folks who have paper copies, these are really like just your cheat sheet. It basically summarizes all the graphs and charts I'm going to show you in more detail and kind of does it in a more of a narrative format. But I really want to get into the results. So if you can skip two more slides, the key findings. 1, 2, one more. Yeah, perfect. And then we're going to dive into the key findings. But before I do that, I typically in this part of the presentation like to take a quick pause and see if anyone has any kind of just logistical questions on how we got here, how we did our data sampling, anything not covered, kind of that may impact how you view the results before we actually share the results themselves. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Would you mind coming up and just grabbing that mic, Sarah? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Spear, Board of Education. And I was curious how the respondent demographics compare with the known demographics of the town of Portland.
Yeah, like I said, we didn't necessarily aim for have a perfect census rep of the town due to our sample methodology. And also because interest was so high, we hated to, a lot of times when we do it that way, we fill a couple buckets first, and you have a lot of town residents going and clicking the survey and say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't need your responses from you anymore. We didn't really want to turn anyone away. I can say we were a little bit light in males. I think when I looked at census, it was closer to 47-48% in town of males. But obviously we did have 8 or 9% say don't know. And the age was pretty rep from what we saw overall. I don't have anything beyond those two at this point. But yeah, for those two, we didn't see any red flags in the data to say like, okay, hey, we had too many folks in one or two demographics answering the survey. Anything? Oh.
Any Board of Selectmen members or Board of Education members have questions, or Dr. Britton as well?
Awesome. All right. So we can go to the next slide now. And we can start sharing some good news. So first and foremost, as I said, we kind of had an intro section of the survey. We asked folks to just kind of get a baseline of what they think of the town, what their priorities are from the town before we actually presented, which were some pretty lengthy and detailed descriptions of the proposed plans and what we're actually looking to get the final data out of. So, first and foremost, I think the key takeaways on this slide for the folks in this room are 87.8% said that they had a positive view of the quality of life in town. Over 3/4, 76%, said that the quality of the public schools was important on their decision to live in Portland. And only 7.1% indicated a likelihood to move out of town in the near future. I think we used about 3 to 5 years. So folks are happy here. The schools play no small part in that happiness, and very few folks already have plans to leave town. So really strong kind of overall kind of quality of life metrics to just kind of start the survey. Next slide. And then we started to kind of get into a little bit more about what folks know heading into the survey. And again, we saw some pretty good ratings and good information out of that. So first and foremost, we not only linked the full facility study committee report in the survey itself, but we also gave a brief description and asked folks just how aware you were that this was formed on, I believe it was February 1st, 2021. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Yep. And we had almost 60% said that they were aware of it prior to the survey. So folks were mindful of it, knew that it was kind of happening in town. We did see right around half when we actually got into some of the specific capital investments recommended as part of that, or at least kind of thought to be the needs for the Portland public schools over the next 3 to roughly 10 years. We saw about half were aware that, within the next 3 years, the schools are going to need about $17 million worth of infrastructure improvements. In the next 10 years, just the secondary schools, we're going to need about $11 million of infrastructure. And then finally, all in all the schools combined, we saw 46% were aware that, there's going to be approximately about $30 million needed heading into the next 10 years. So again, what that told us is people kind of are mindful of the needs of the town, understand that there's going to be some capital investments in that. And again, thinking back to that previous slide, already see the value in Portland public schools, not only potentially for their children, but also just for the quality of life and why they chose to live here. Next slide. So here's where we kind of get into, we wanted to show a little bit of some different cross sections of the data. So I'll really just call your attention to the parents column. So that 388 public school parents we got. As you can see, awareness of all these issues kind of facing the school and these capital investment needs was higher among that group than the general population, including 2/3 of parents saying they were the facility study committee, and 3 and 5 saying that they, anticipated about $17 million worth of capital improvements or infrastructure improvements in the next 1 to 3 years. And we didn't see any loss of awareness when we took out the very small group of folks that said that they were not likely to actually vote on this in 2024. Next slide. So then we got into, starting with that facility study committee report, we wanted to kind of start to see, where are folks kind of level of agreement, or where is there consensus within the town kind of, hey, where are we going? What's the direction we're heading in? And I think really on this slide, and as we kind of get further into the data, you'll see that we started to really see a key theme kind of emerge starting here, and that carried throughout the rest of the survey, and that there was definitely a very mindful and intentional balance within the survey respondents, the general public's mind of how they were kind of viewing these issues. So I think just kind of looking at the top 5 of the most important things that folks agreed with were that should be the goals of the Portland Public Schools. 3 of those focus on really maximizing and improving school safety and security, maximizing air quality, heating, cooling, HVAC, all those type of things, ensuring ADA compliance and making sure schools are accessible for all students. All saw, almost near unanimous consensus, all over 90% agreeing that that was important. However, almost an equal percentage of folks also said that it was important for the town to do it in a way that optimizes learning spaces in a cost-effective manner, and also minimize the cost to taxpayers while keeping the current standards high. So, hey, we know there needs to be improvements. We just want to make sure it's being done kind of a fiscally responsible way, in a way that really, maximizes the ultimate goal for our students. And obviously you can read the full chart to see everything, but we saw really across the board, pretty high levels of agreements and importance placed on what were the main essential consensus goals that came out of that facility committee report. And I think really here, I'll just call your attention to really the final kind of row in this table or bar graph here. And that's really, we asked folks, we just gave them a statement and say, hey, do you strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree with this statement? Significant facility improvements are necessary to the Portland Public Schools to ensure the long-term stability of the school infrastructure. One of the things we came into when we originally kicked off this meeting was there was this idea that there was consensus that everyone kind of knew something needed to be done. So as researchers, what we wanted to do is really test that. And we saw that 68.4% of the general public agreed with that statement. So almost 2/3. And when you think about political issues, there's not many 70-30 issues anymore, 65-35. So really high level of consensus within the town, acknowledging that something needs to be done, as we saw in the previous slide, and acknowledgement that something needs to be done probably in the next 1 to 3 years to hit the goals overall. And then looking specifically at that row, again, kind of thinking about parents, over 8 in 10 parents said that they expected or agreed that significant facility improvements were needed to ensure the infrastructure of the school. Next slide, please. All right. Let's get into kind of the actual results for the proposal options. So before we go to the next slide, I'll just kind of set up how we did this. It's a little research methodology, but also kind of want to understand how we got to the data and why we feel pretty confident in the results. So doing this in a digital manner, we are able to create some experimental design within the survey itself to kind of reduce order bias or self-selection bias in the survey. So what we did was we presented each of the 3 plans in full detail. We did so in a distinct manner, and we randomized them. So every survey respondent saw them in a slightly different order. And we asked them, hey, just in a bucket to start, would you support or oppose this plan? Strongly support, somewhat oppose, strongly oppose. We gave them a don't know option as well. And then they saw the next plan, read it, answer the same question, saw the next plan. So, if you took the survey on a Tuesday, you may have saw plan 3, 2, 1. If your wife or neighbor took it on a Wednesday, they may have saw 2, 1, 3. What that helps us is make sure, you don't get to the end of these 3 pretty detailed proposals and 3, pretty high dollar amounts that we were asking people about and get that survey fatigue of like, oh man, you just hit me for 35 million, now 46. And now, you want me to ask if I also support another 38 million. So we wanted to do it to really kind of reduce that and have people give the option just in a vacuum. Ultimately, if the bonding question were to come up, it would be a binary choice, yes, no. So present those kind of as what we're calling, it's not necessarily a discrete choice, but a distinct choice. And then at the end, we let everyone read everything over again. We built a nice table right in the digital kind of survey platform. They could see 3 plans side by side, and we asked them to choose one. So I'm going to start going to the next slide to present just kind of what we're calling this individual distinct choice. So what's the good news? The good news is what we kind of labeled as plan 2, which is that middle kind of bar chart or middle circle graph. That is what was called the one elementary school plan. And again, in this, all the full plans are detailed in the appendix in the paper copy, and we can definitely go to it during Q&A if you want to see the full details of it. So that was the plan that decommissioned both Gildersleeve and Brownstone. That was the plan that saw the strongest support in a vacuum. So 56.9% either moderately or strongly supported that plan. That was the only plan that actually got a majority of support. Although, as you can see, plan 3, which was basically, hey, we keep all 3 schools, the 3 local schools, and we just do kind of the bare bones, not the bare bones minimum, but we just do the necessary capital improvements, not a lot of augmentation to the buildings, their use, really just improve HVAC, air quality, the necessary kind of building envelope things. That received the next highest support with just about 50%, 49.8. And then the kind of the middle option, it was plan 1 on this slide, but the plan that kept 2 elementary schools and just decommissioned Gildersleeve saw the lowest level support, 41.9%. Next slide. And again, I think the 2 really nice things here to kind of follow up on the next slide is really, again, want to call your attention to that final column in the table and look at the parents. So really that plan 2, that plan that would decommission 2 elementary schools was supported significantly more by parents. So it was 56.9 among the general population. Among parents, it jumped to 68.3%. So not an obvious data-driven idea that we captured of folks being concerned that their local school, the school they went to, being closed. Nostalgia, for lack of better terms, but an acknowledgement that, hey, this might not make any sense for the next kind of future generation of Portland. And as you can see there, we also saw the 2 elementary school plan jump among parents as well, but that plan 3 to keep everything in place was consistent among parents compared to the general public. So we didn't see any higher support among parents for plan 3, or the plan that left all 3 schools in place compared to the overall population. We did ask folks a follow-up question, which is okay, if only Valley View remained and it was in kind of a new, renovated to new, and expanded upon, I think, to create wings for the different grade levels, would you like to see it go from pre-K to 5th or pre-K to 6th? Plurality of folks, just under 50%, 48.7 said pre-K to 5th, with another 37% say pre-K to 6th. And then next slide. So here's where we basically, when we asked in a comparative choice, essentially the rank order of the 3 plans played out the same way. So plan 2 got a plurality of support, 42.5%. 3 came in at just under 28%, 19.5% for plan 1. And I think one of the promising things is, when we got here, and we kind of were trying to think about what the Venn diagram of support might look like, we only saw about 10% of hard no's. So, hey, regardless of what you put up, I'm voting no. That was 10.4% said that they would not support any of these proposed plans if they were to come to potential bonding question. And again, I think really importantly too, among parents, that plan that keeps just Valley View and decommissions Gildersleeve and Brownstone did get majority support, even in a comparative choice with 4 different options, just over 50% at 51.3%. Next slide. So I think here, we obviously asked folks, okay, well, hey, there's some acknowledgement that we may decommission 2 elementary schools. We want to know exactly what you think about it and what you want to use those schools for. And we could see is folks a little bit more mixed or more lack of certainty over exactly how they want to use it. Just about 40% of both options said they were unsure how they eventually like to see either Gildersleeve or Brownstone used. There's more of a preference that Brownstone remained in public use. That was over 40%. But I think more importantly, the kind of circle graphs you see there is we ask folks, okay, well, regardless of your preference, is it important to your vote to know what we're going to do with these schools before we actually put it up to an eventual vote? And as you can see, an overwhelming majority of folks, 78 and 80% respectively, said that they wanted to know ahead of the eventual vote, whatever the plans were, that there was a plan and that it was communicated to the public. And that speaks to kind of everything we saw about the interest, the participation rate, and eventually when we get into some of the communication slides, it even further supports that. Next slide. And then we went back and forth on this and kind of the best way to position it, but we ultimately then, towards the end of the survey, asked folks, hey, as we acknowledged earlier in the survey, we don't want to leave the secondary schools out. So any one of these options, we could also include a third option where we essentially add about $11 million in capital investments to the secondary schools. Based on whatever your choice was, would you be more or less likely to support this proposal if that additional capital investments and if you knew the secondary schools were also being taken care of? And as you can see here, pretty split. 32% said more likely to support, 23% said less likely to, or more likely to oppose, I should say. So still more support than opposition. But I think when you think back to the slides a few slides ago, when you're looking at 49%, 56% support for any one of the plans, that 23% can be pretty impactful and may actually cause, the potential, passage to be less successful. But I think overall, again, one of the really important things we saw in there is 36% of parents were more likely to support if it included the secondary schools. Makes sense. You pick up some parents who probably don't have kids in elementary schools, but hey, want to see something done for their schools as well. But even more importantly, among the most 2 popular plans, almost 40% of folks said they were more likely to support. So 37.4 supporters of plan 2, saying they were more likely to support plan 2 if it included that, and 38.5% supporters of plan 1. And last but not least, in terms of the data, and we'll happen to open up for any questions. So at the end of the survey, we asked a couple questions, just kind of, hey, where do we go from here? we asked folks what the most important thing was to them to learn from the town between now and whenever a potential bonding question is put in front of voters. 71.7% said the final mill rate increase and what the cost of the individual taxpayers were actually going to be. And over half said, not surprisingly, the length of time to do the construction and make the improvements, especially knowing that, you know, potentially some schools would be decommissioned or out of use. What was that going to actually impact for the eventual students, roads, area, construction, bus routes, all those type of things. And then the preferred communication methods, direct mail and email were 1 and 2, 20% for email, 28% for direct mail. A fair amount of people wanted to see things through the newspaper and town website as well. But I think really importantly here to kind of talk to that theme we saw throughout this study is we asked folks, hey, A, would you be just more interested in hearing more from the town? And B, would you actually sign up to provide your email to actually be on a list to get updates on this from the town? 71.7% said, yeah, they're interested in updates moving forward. And ultimately about 468 folks, or 46.8% of the 1,000 elected to provide an email as well. So, you know, I think really if we were kind of look at the executive summary in detail, kind of the final theme just to kind of say is this is, again, really high participation, interest is high, acknowledgement of the need is high, and there is at least majority support for 1, maybe 2 plans when you're looking at plan 1 and 3 with those, you know, 49%, 56% support, but it's definitely not concrete. We got about 23% saying that they may be less likely to support or more likely to oppose if more funding goes into the plan for the secondary schools. And, you know, you have somewhere between half of folks saying that, hey, the final mill rate increase and what the town gives me in terms of information between now and when the eventual bonding question comes up is also important and may impact my eventual vote. So strong interest, strong acknowledgement of need, support for 1 to 2 plans in plurality or majority support, but definitely not necessarily, for lack of better terms, a slam dunk or certain that you know the town is all in on any one of the options. But again, really happy with the results, happy with the demographics we captured, happy with the interest, and again, knowing that we got 1,000, you know, that 3% margin. Again, if we were to do this study in 6 months, we expected to see, and not a whole lot has changed in terms of information to the public. You know, you expect to see that 56.9% be somewhere between 59 and 53%. So again, we can make some pretty strong conclusions about the eventual data and how that will extrapolate to the final market if and when this were to come to a bonding question. So that in mind, the last 4 slides are just a copy of the plans, which I'm happy to show you how we explain them in full detail, the postcard, and a little bit about us. But at this point, also happy to open it up to any questions.
Board of Selectmen members, Board of Education members. Open up to questions. Yeah.
No, this is probably impossible. Can we
Go-
go back to slide?
Sure. Do you mind coming up and using the microphone?
Yeah.
Probably asking you to do something you can't do. Can we go back to the slide with the 3 options where you see option 1, 2, and 3, and then the 41, 56, 49?
Yeah. So
There you go.
Yep.
That to me is an important slide.
Okay.
Is there any way to glean from that? Like this is a A, B, or C. Is there any way to glean from that head to head? Like if it were only option 1 or 2, which would you choose? If it were only option 2 or 3, what would you choose? If it were only option 1 versus 3, what would you choose? You follow me? Like if, because I heard you say at the end, there wasn't a slam dunk about any one plan because there's 3. Would we have been able to achieve a slam dunk if we had only brought 2 out in the survey? And can you dig into the numbers and read
Yeah.
tea leaves on that?
Great question. Yeah, so the best way is to really look at, so this again, this in a vacuum. So you only saw one and you're asked support or opposition. We didn't ask kind of head to head, you know, plan A versus plan B versus plan C. But we did ask kind of overall, just with all 3 laid out, where would you land out of the three? And to me, that was really the more telling slide because you saw Plan 2 emerge. We didn't note it, but I can tell you it's significantly higher, the choice of Plan 2 over Plan 1 and 3 at that 42%. Yeah.
So the vote you get, it's like Plan 1 was out, and it were head to head between the two most popular. Where would you think the people who chose Plan 1 would move?
Yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have a perfect answer for that. Happy to talk. There are some probably techniques with the data we could do, but definitely not tonight. What we could essentially do is remove the Plan 2 supporters and run the frequency with just Plan 1 and 3 and basically move the Plan 2 to don't knows or skips and see how those extrapolate, but the proportions will basically be the same. They'll just be, you'll be looking at 58% of the population versus the full 100% when we took that 42 out. That's a great question. That is a true discrete choice, which is a very fun but very lengthy survey.
Any other questions from Board of Selectmen, Board of Education members on this? Yeah, Laurel, come on up.
My question is, you break out the data with parents versus the general population, and I'm wondering if there were any other, based on the demographic information you collected, any other notable differences in demographic groups with these answers? Is that information that you could share with us, or
Yeah, we'd be happy to share. Definitely.
things we should be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. We'd be happy to share. Nothing I can say for purposes of tonight, nothing was alarming enough that warranted a slide. But I'm sure there are some differences here or there between ages, so on and so forth. We really focused on this just based on our notes with the parents and the likely voters. Really, even with the likely voters, so many indicated it that they basically were right in line with the general public because it was almost 98% of the population. But yeah, we could definitely look at age and all that stuff. And I think that's a great kind of segue. On the paper copy and on the full presentation, our contact information is on the back. We're always an email away. Our firm's right up in Glastonbury, and I'm right over the bridge in Middletown. So we're happy to answer any questions and kind of provide any consultation on any of that as you get kind of closer to final plans and you want to look at things in more depth.
So I also want to say that the full report or presentation will be on the town website for the public to review at their leisure. Also, if there's anyone from the public that has questions, you can reach out to Seamus or myself. If you email me your questions, I will get those answered from, I'll reach out to you as well. Are there any other questions at this time from board members? I just want to say thank you for all your work, Seamus.
Yeah.
This has been a long road to get here, but I think that this does help us proceed forward with our next steps. And we have some more work to do.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for having us. And again, if you took the survey, thank you. Civic participation. It's great. So we really appreciate it. And we're glad it was successful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seamus.
All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to
I make a
adjourn.
motion, we adjourn.
I'll second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's 7:04. There will be a regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen coming up after those who don't want to stay can leave.